Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kim Meijer. I'm with the Ames marketing team, and today we are accommodating a live webinar session from our headquarters in the Netherlands. The topic we're covering today is creating an effective S&OP support system without worrying about cleaning your data. It's my pleasure today to welcome our moderator, Martijn Lofvers. Martijn is CEO and Chief Trend Watcher at Supply Chain Movement and has many years of experience as a trend watcher. He has created several pioneering content formats about supply chain management, as for example the IT subway map. Through his large network, he enables an exchange of supply chain experience and knowledge. Martijn will be covering the steps involved in the journey of supply chain optimization, followed by a discussion with Willem Vesters, VP Global Supply Chain Planning at Liberty Global. Together they will discuss how Willem's network planning team started small and created the most feasible plan that resulted in high business impact. Willem has spent most of his career in operations. He leads the supply chain planning division at Liberty Global, the largest international cable company. More about Willem and Liberty Global will follow later. I'm also happy to announce that we have Jack Paul, Managing Director from Supply Chain Consultant Districon, with us in the room today. I hope you will enjoy the webinar, and with that I'd like to turn over to Martijn.
Oh, hello everybody. Good day, or good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everywhere around the world. We've quite some listeners today. That's great to hear, especially about S&OP, Sales and Operations Planning, a complex process. And well, we have an interesting discussion. First of all, what we see is the world is changing, and that means that decision making will be changing as much. So based on that, we have created a checklist with 10 painful questions, and we would like to discuss about it. First, I would like to ask Jack, what kind of painful question do you see in this market?
Thanks, Martijn. With regards to painful questions, I think a topic what we all see in general is that the amount of data the supply chains have to deal with is increasing rapidly. We see that networks are becoming more complex and more integrated. We also see rapidly changing environments. Think about multi-channel environments, those kind of topics. And as well a very disruptive world where you have to manage your risks in your supply chain ongoing. We believe that this requires a different way of working with optimization software and an agile, fast approach to develop and to react to changing environments. And that's also why, together with Ames and Supply Chain Movement, we designed the checklist. And as you see on the screen, you see four of the 10 questions that we have defined together. And they are, for instance, about frequent optimization of your network. They're about risk mitigation in your network. They're about scenario management, something which is really important as well if you have risk in your supply chain, and about an integrated view on your planning processes in the planning cycle. Those I think are the things we really see very often when we discuss with our clients about S&OP.
Okay, Jack, thanks. Willem, you see the 4 questions, and we would like to test one of them with the audience. And which one is applicable to your case for Liberty Global?
Thanks, Martijn. I think I am at the receiving end of all the painful questions. If not from you, then it is from my own management. I think for us, the most relevant question is, do you optimize risk mitigation in your complete supply chain network? Risk mitigation is for us a most important topic. I would say because our company is in a quite fluctuating state, both from an operational point of view and an operational creation point of view. So therefore, we mostly focus on risk and risk mitigation. At this moment, less focused on, I would say, detailed inventory management, because that is a secondary risk or opportunity we are managing.
All right. So let's check it out. And as listeners, you can mark down if it's yes or no. Do you optimize risk mitigation in your complete supply chain network? So that's a really painful question. So we tend to make it rather no. So the more painful, the more no's. So Jack, what does this mean for you?
I think that it means that we certainly have an area of attention with the audience, and that's as well what we see in the market. So the current processes and systems do not cope enough with the challenging environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we need to do something there together.
Yeah. So that's what Liberty Global has done together with Districon and Ames. So next, Willem, I would like to ask you to explain what Liberty Global is doing in the markets. So yes. What is Liberty Global and what does supply chain mean for Liberty Global?
In Liberty Global as a company, most of the time is less known to a large number of people, but what Kim already said is we are a cable company, and we're actually a consolidation of a number of cable companies and brands that are better known in the individual countries. So we operate in the Netherlands under the brand of Ziggo. In the United Kingdom we operate under Virgin Media. In Germany, Unity Media, Belgium, Telenet, and many others. So I guess those cable names are more familiar to the people than the name Liberty Global. Typically, we sell subscriptions, data subscriptions, and entertainment subscriptions, so TV. So people would say, what is your supply chain then all about? Our supply chain consists of delivering the products through which we deliver our services. So those are all the set-top boxes, modems, and so on. And at the second phase, we're building our networks as well. So every cable in the ground, fiber in the ground, and so on, network materials, data center materials, those are all ours as well. If we combine that together, so both the what we call CPE, customer premise equipment, and the network materials, that's a combined volume of roughly 1.5 to 2 billion euros turnover. So that is slowly but surely an interesting piece to get a control and a grip on. More importantly, I would say Liberty Global as a $20 billion company, we're now focusing less and less over the years on mergers and acquisitions. I think we've got a stellar track record over the last 15 years to combine and to buy all these local or in-country cable companies to merge it to a single big one. Because the numbers start to count now. We've gotten 29 million customers, 56 million homes passed. And now the operations piece is becoming more and more important. So our growth, always realized by mergers and acquisitions, and now slowly needs to come from operational growth. So we can't just buy another company anymore. We actually have to physically build our network and physically expand our footprint in order to attract more customers. This transition and this change in focus, in business focus, has led for us to the first question: how do we scale sustainably? How do we scale manageably? And how do we keep that in control? So to Martijn's earlier question, what's our focus point? It's all around scenario and risk mitigation. The challenging piece is, if you're coming from a period where there's very limited focus on planning, supply chain planning and risk mitigation, how do you then, as quickly as possible, generate something that you can work with in a international, multinational environment where the standard of answer and question is very high, and the patience, executive patience, is very limited. So how do you deal with that? And I guess that was the main questions that we were faced with going forward. So Liberty Global, a large cable company in transition from M&A to operational growth. With the accumulation of 13 smaller companies, the numbers start to count, and that's how we position us in Europe at this moment.
So if you have two different categories, on one hand the cables, and on the other hand the set-top boxes and so forth,
yeah.
What is the main challenge? What is the most complex category for you as a supply chain director?
For me, it's less related to the category itself. The complexity is mainly driven by company culture and company executives, I would say. The type of questions that are asked, the type of risk that need to be mitigated. Both, I would say, both units or both product groups have sourcing either in the Far East, where you have long lead time complexity, or in the network space we've got far more products, so tens of thousands, where the variety of products becomes or create a complexity. So I think from that level, both groups have has its own characteristics and create its own complexity. It's more around the management thereof that creates the additional superior complexity, I would say. And then I guess network is more difficult because it has a newer focus, and it's positioned as the enabler for our future growth, and therefore it has a lot of management attention. So if you have 10 smart executives asking 10 difficult questions, that will fill up a week very quickly.
So what about new product introductions? So how do you grow in the coming years?
As I said, we are moving from an M&A drive. We always will do M&A, so don't get me wrong there, but the operational drive is increasing. So we're introducing new products from a CPE, so from a set-top box and modems point of view, much more standardized across the footprint and the portfolio. So we're going to a lower amount of platforms, a much higher scale and volume. So standardization in CPE is key. In CPE, we've got those long lead times as the complexity, and therefore the supply risk is all related to components. If we look at our growth in the network space, and now we're looking at the slide that more or less voices what our ambition is over the next couple of years. We are planning on an RGU growth of 6 to 7 million RGUs. An RGU is a revenue generating unit, so that's a set-top box or a modem in your house or a customer. This is all operational growth that we have to build ourselves. So this requires a lot of this network extension and network expansion. We're looking at an NPS improvement of 15 to 20 points. I think the cable industry is known amongst other industries to have the worst customer experience, if not from billing, then it is from quality or call center performance or whatsoever. And we take this very seriously, because what we see as well is there are disruptive competitors in the market. They are coming in the market. Monopoly position that we have in some markets with owning our network is coming to an end. We, just like the telcos, we will have to open up our network at some day. In Belgium, this is already reality. Other markets will follow soon, we think. So paying attention to our customers is absolutely vital. And then, of course, we are a strong financially driven company. So our OCF growth targets, they actually pay for our capability to expand. And the 7 to 9% CAGR, so the average growth rate on an annual base, is pretty steep. But it indicates as well how serious we take our expansion, our operational expansion, and how serious we take our customer and customer values.
So I was wondering, you're talking about new competitors. So Amazon is also invading the home market.
Absolutely.
Do you see that? Do you feel it?
Not to a lesser extent, but we absolutely see the Netflixes, the Amazons invading our content space. So where we have obviously a strong drive to deliver content, so the TV content, and we absolutely suffer from the Netflixes.
But Amazon has also their own device introduced in the US.
Yes,
it's a huge success.
That's a huge, absolutely, for the video space. And what we see is traditional linear TV fading away, and what we call over the top TV is introduced more and more, and that means that people don't tune into a channel anymore at a specific time because something is broadcasted. They want to see something whenever they want it, wherever they want it. So therefore our capability to deliver that content is absolutely key and crucial, and therefore our network operation in order to support that is key and crucial. Amazon with its devices is absolutely posing a risk and a competition factor in our content sales. Their challenge is they will still need a network, and they still need a connection in order to deliver their services. Yeah. So we're always, for this moment, somewhere in between. The moment we get networks that are long distance wireless, 5G, would be an option, but 5G, the coverage of 5G is already less and is closing into Wi-Fi. So you need so many new antennas and so on. Those are going to be difficult business cases. But the moment industries or segments would be able to skip the cable network, then we are in true trouble, I would say.
Back again to the supply chain environment. So and then we have a slide here from Gartner, and they have different stages of supply chain maturity, starting from the lower right corner when you start in stage 1 and you are very fragmented, and then in stage 2 you are still being siloed where you're improving, and then moving on to stage 3 you start to align, and later on to stage 3, 4 and 5 in the end you end up being demand driven. So my question to you is, and maybe you should answer it both for your cable product group and your set-top boxes group. So where do you think your supply chain is in this curve within Liberty Global?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, what I said, the cable industry is not traditional, the most developed and most advanced industry in terms of supply chain development and supply chain concept implementation. So if I'm completely honest, the attention and the energy we've put in our CPE, so in our modem and set-top boxes unit over the last 4 or 5 years, have resulted in that we are, I would say, in between stage 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. We run S&OP processes. We have a value and volume-based demand plan that we move into a supply plan. We've got managed and controlled inventory positions across Europe. It's consolidated on the European level. We have European conversations with our vendors. So that is, and we've got an aligned decision structure for product introductions. So that is absolutely going towards the stage 3, I would say. Mm-hmm. Network, on the other hand, has traditionally always been built by engineers, are extremely creative. So whatever problem or challenge they will face, they'll solve it. Not necessarily in most optimal way for a business outcome, but definitely in a most optimal way so that it is easiest for them to manage. So if they have, for example, an ordering challenge, they won't say, let's build a good ordering process that we net our inventory versus what we need and so on. They will say, no, I've got an ordering process. I only want to deal with this once a year. So I'll order for once a year and then we'll see what I can build with that.
Sounds like a silo and an island.
That sounds like absolutely like a silo and an island. And I think 2 years ago, we've taken the route, Liberty Global as a company, to indicate growth is so fundamental important for us in this network space that we need to get a grip on those material movements as well. Because the last thing that we can afford is we are planning on an area where we want to connect 15 or 20,000 homes in a new build area, and suddenly we miss either the cable or we miss some ducts or we miss a connector in order to complete that build. Therefore, 2 years ago, we started building a supply chain planning capability for these network materials. And that is slowly now coming to I would say, in between stage 1, stage 2 maturity level. Still a long way to go, absolutely. But we were able to accelerate there some steps. And the view that we had together with Districon aims is actually to leapfrog a little bit further and more accelerated. And now we're seeing how we can do that. And actually, I think in the last 2 years, what we've built, and actually with the cooperation of AIMS in the last year almost, and Districon, we've developed, I think, more quickly than I've had developments in other companies like Philips that we made in 3 to 4 years. So we were able to accelerate pieces.
So this is a long course that could take years, yeah, to get from 1 to 5. Yeah. What I also see in the market that some companies who have the need or the urgency or a burning platform to do this course like an oil tanker and what I call mode 1 and Gartner called mode 1, but take a speedboat approach, a scrum approach, and cut corners. So I was wondering, so this is also the approach to cut corners.
Yes, absolutely. We are looking for cutting corners. We always have to realize we are a tanker. We are a $20 billion company, but where we can cut corners, we will. I think the ability and the capability to cut corners is again very much related to how acceptable is your executive management to new decision methods, new decision-making processes, and thirdly, but definitely not lastly, new technology that supports those decisions. Those are crucial ingredients in order to start cutting corners. If your management is not open and if your organization structure is still siloed, you can cut all the corners that you want, but then you're still stuck in stage 2 because you need to overcome that silo mentality and that silo progress. So it's a piece of culture change as well. Sometimes you have the burning platform. I think in the CPE space 4 or 5 years ago, we did have that burning platform because we were stocking out on set-top boxes, and without set-top boxes we can't connect new customers, so you create your burning platform. What we see as well, you immediately go to stage 4, stage 5 because everybody is aligned, everybody is there, you've got executive attention, you've got all the ingredients that you need. The moment you stabilize the situation and the moment you get in smooth sailing waters, if you're not very careful, you slowly but surely sail back to stage 4, 3, 2 and 1 if you're not careful.
Don't you have, or didn't you have the tooling for the decision support to maintain that level?
Yes and no. We did have the tooling because we did invest in tooling. There again, this is a technology adoption rate, what I personally call it. We implemented toolings, and with the best brand names you can find in the Garden quadrants. However, if you don't educate your people properly, and that's not only executive, but as well your planners, your S&OP managers and so on, if you don't educate them in that tooling and you don't maintain that and properly deploy that, you will fall back. No matter what name of tooling you put in there, but you will fall back. That is what we've seen as well in that CPE space. I don't say we've fallen back completely to stage 2 or stage 1, but I think from the attention level where we were definitely in between stage 3 and 4, and we've seen it slowing down and dripping down to stage 3 and perhaps a little bit between 3 and 2. So we need to revamp that. That is something that is on our roadmap as well to do, and this is where we need to start putting additional new effort in not only solving a crisis, because solving a crisis is nice, but proving to have a continuous capability. And personally for me, that is a lot around risk management and growth enablement. So I need to be able to predict what kind of growth scenarios we have, and with decision-making support and decision-making and technology that supports that decision-making process, I need to be able to indicate these are the decisions we need to make. Otherwise, we won't be able to fulfill our growth plan. Only if you have that tie into an executive agenda, you will stay on the radar screen. If you don't have that continuous tie in that executive agenda, you will fall back.
Could you take us back in time a bit, how you started out to work with AIMS and Districon? So what was your approach? What is your real problem? And how do you approach it to solve it?
Well, I had a challenge. What I said, especially a year and a half, 2 years ago, I needed to come up with some proper answers around network material planning. Where are our risks? Where were our risks? Did we have enough fiber for the next coming years and all that kind of good stuff? What we saw was what was happening is, because we're not the only company that is building, other companies are building as well, so our competitors are building, and what we see is in the end we all go to the same supply base. So we saw our lead times moving up from 8 weeks to 10 weeks, from 10 to 12 to 14 and so on. So we saw the supply risk increasing. At the same time, our board was presenting, and still is presenting, a very aggressive expansion program. That was a recipe for disaster, for that matter. So this was the challenge that I was faced with. In my search there, I obviously realized I need to build the basic blocks of proper master data for all these items. A basic building block, creating transactional visibility. based on those two, you can do some proper and automated replenishment and planning. Mm-hmm. But this takes time, because typically the systems of record, almost call these, that enable these automations and transactional structures are the ERPs of this world, and so on. So changing our 12 different ERPs in countries was a no-go. So we needed to connect that in a different way. But then building that layer, building your master data foundation and building something like a replenishment capability on top of that, I knew that was going to take me at least 3 years. Because it's slow, it's sluggish, these are big systems, difficult to customize, yeah. Difficult to implement. My questions were tomorrow. My questions needed an answer the day after tomorrow. And so I needed something fast. I needed something completely flexible. I needed something that I could customize around my topics of today and potentially change or rebuild to future needs. And I needed something that didn't cost the world, to be honest. So, because a number of these ERP solutions, before you sneeze, you're down a couple of million. And these ingredients together, I was having in my head trying to look for these solutions, and then I ran in Barcelona on a very nice evening into both Districon and Ames, and they proposed, or they outlined what their service was, what their capability was, and how they would approach such a challenge or such a problem.
But how do you know they are the right party?
That's a good question. I think all reality and all seriousness, there's quite a high number of parties that can solve these questions, because we're not talking rocket science, B, we're not trying to solve world peace or cold nuclear fusion. It's all pretty much common sense and basic, not basic knowledge, but common knowledge. So for me, the most important piece is there a trust factor and a belief that they can walk with you through the process and they can solve the solution. Obviously, they have to have some proven cases. Well, that wasn't the issue with Ames nor Districon. They've done this before. They know what to do. Then the most important thing is there a proper connection between our people at Liberty and the people at Ames and the people at Districon in order to get to those solutions. And that is potentially a leap of faith. You just have to start. Formally, you can go through a whole bunch of RFPs and so on. And normally, I'd say if I spend more than, let's say, $1 million, yes, we should do that. We have to do that because we're a public listed company. Because this is still limited and manageable. This is all about speed. It's about time. It's about trust. And I think those three elements were there, both in Barcelona. When they pitched it, we said, let's do a 2-day proof of concept workshop. So let's get the right people together in a small environment in order to see whether this is going to work, yes or no. That is the crucial moment where the trust comes up, where the flexibility is proven. And if that works, the process will work. That was my trust in that setup.
Jack, how do you approach such a workshop? So what are the phases you're going through in those 2 days?
Yeah. Well, let's take the Liberty Global example, and yes, we of course we met each other already in Barcelona, so we already knew something about their processes, but basically we almost started blank. So we started a 2-day workshop, first of all understanding their business processes, their challenge, their scope, basically the scope of the things that they would like us to deliver, and we get a bunch of data, so day-to-day data out of the Liberty Global environment. And we worked in parallel, discussing the business processes and basically crunching the data and developing a kind of a proof of concept. So after these 2 days, we were able to present our view on their processes, and at the same moment, the proof of concept in the Ames tooling, so that they could see that it all really would work.
Mm-hmm. What was your feedback in the final result at the end of those 2 days?
Literally in 48 hours, and especially at the time when we were having dinner with a larger group, there were some Districon modelers doing the actual tough work in the evening hours. So the impression there was these are dedicated people, motivated and absolutely into delivering a proper solution. The outcome for us was in 2 days we had a prototype of an application that could support us in not only providing answers to the questions that we were getting, but as well starting to create something of which we could see this could be developed on a longer term into something more around risk management and so on. So the 2 days gave us an insight, okay, yes, this tool can give us the answer to the immediate need. And it'll help us with, in our case, demand forecast consolidation, but as well there were immediately elements in there that could help us building forecasts, translating engineering language into material language, which is, I think, one of the crucial functions of a supply chain team as well. And they've literally built in a matter of 2 days some of those elements in there, and they explained how they would bring more functionality to life if it was requested. So it's not only we tell what we want, they build it. No, we tell what our challenge is. We tell a little bit what we want. They build that, but on top of that, they show as well, if you're looking further ahead, these are the next level of functionality you can expect.
But it's more than just a live demo, and so how many percentage was it covered what you needed at that moment?
At that moment, it covered, I think, 60 to 70% what we needed.
Oh.
That's absolutely high. You can say you had a low bar. That's the other side of the equation. I think we were realistic because you have 2 days and you need to be clear on what you want to expect. Again, don't expect world peace in 2 days, but if you have a tangible challenge, and for us again it was a consolidation of forecast and some ways in order to come up with statistical forecast predictions going forward so we can start seeing bottlenecks in our future demand. That was the first question. That was the major question. And the second question, can we develop algorithms, but can we develop breakdowns where we can translate engineering language, which is in our case around homes passed, homes connected, and so on. Can we translate that in, okay, what kind of cables, connectors and amplifiers do we need? Can you help us with that? They said, well, we will do it like this. If we have that, then we can move it into that projection as well. So that wasn't immediately there, but at least it gave an outline on how that was.
And how does this tool fit in the overall S&OP process?
So we don't call our process within network S&OP at this moment, because that would not give the right value to the term S&OP. Where it gave us value was an immediate conversation with engineering. If you want to build these homes passed over the next year, we need to start ordering these materials now. The other materials we can order later. And by the way, your actuals, so what you're actually implementing or actually building, is consuming this much. So just having that operational dialogue was an enabler to build a trust bridge.
So this is the input for your supply planning,
yeah,
probably.
Exactly. So we just started with basic demand and supply and see whether we could match that. And it gave us a conversation with engineering to start a first level of trust. Hey, these guys know what they're talking about, and therefore we can leave certain tasks and responsibilities to these guys so that we can focus more on the engineering piece. Especially that accelerated in a program where we introduced new materials. So a second challenge to the expansion is data consumption goes up with 40% a year. So we have to increase capacity on an annual basis significantly. And at some points we need to completely trade in technology, old technology with new technology. So we're now introducing new levels of technology. So we have a massive phase-in, phase-out process for that. And the ability to have a full forecast on an item level on what we're going to build. And we were able to check that, hey, is this old or new technology? And we could directly engage with the engineering. Some of your countries are still planning for old stuff. They could recheck, rebalance, and redo those design plans and move that back to new technology. So the moment we started to deliver those value adds and those functionalities to the engineering community, you accelerate the whole process through Either you call it an S&OP or a business alignment or a business aligned decision process. I don't really mind how you call it, but that accelerated the true value then of a supply chain community.
And if you're looking ahead, if you look in the supply chain network matters, where you started with as a possible pain point with risk mitigation, what are your next plan for your future?
So my next plans for the future are at least to work to retirement when I'm 70. No, I'm kidding. The next plans are to create a full focus of these network materials, to get and to start aligning that to build strategies from both from a network perspective as a entertainment and connectivity strategy. Because what we see as well, these worlds are pretty siloed next to each other, because we build a network, then we connect a customer, we give them a set-top box. However, with the continuous evolution of this technology and this equipment, the interference of both the set-top box, so the end station of our service, and the network itself are more and more dependent. So we can't just optimize the material plan for network and optimize the material plan for CPE. These two businesses have a dependency. My aim for the next 3 to 4 years is to be able to plan on that interdependency and to start mitigating risks in investment proposals around the integration of these two. Imagine that if our network is not capable to handle a certain capacity, it's no use to introduce a next generation of set-top box, Ultra HD set-top box as an example. Because if everybody starts to watch Ultra HD YouTube movies and Netflix movies, our network is dead in the water. Those investments, in order to exchange a whole installed base of set-top boxes, is easily an investment of around $1 billion US. So the timing of that investment, we know that the investment is gonna happen sometime, sometime, but the timing of that investment, if I can play with 6 months or a year later, and if I can postpone $150 or $200 or $300 million investment with a year, that is optimization of our assets, of our investments, and so on. So that is where I see the true value of combining these problems together, to combine these worlds together, align them, and make sure that we're not running too fast in one area and not backing that with the other area.
And when you look at this slide, with the supply chain footprint, with your regional DCs, etc. So that's the logistics stuff.
Yeah.
So how does your story, what you just explained, translate to this network, and how do you solve this challenge to optimize it in the future or now even?
Happily, I have a colleague who takes care of the logistics, so I throw it on his desk. Now, what I said, the operational expansion of the network is absolutely crucial to our business growth. How we deliver those expansion sites is yes, it's all about logistics. Our planning capability should be able to give an outline where and how we distribute. Whether we are going to distribute all sites from a strongly centralized location. That may work for some areas. In other areas like Romania, it's just too distant and we need more stocking locations and so on. So it's all around service level agreements to the build sites, but it is as well service level agreements to spare parts and spare parts management. Because if a data center goes down, we can't just say, sorry, Ziggo, you will be out of connectivity for 3 days because our spare parts are in Romania. All these service level agreements determine where and how much location we actually need.
But can you actually use aims, like 2 aims for this purpose, to say, okay, how does your network look like, and where should you source, or where should you?
I think absolutely AIMS can do that. We haven't asked or we haven't built a capability in AIMS in order to do that. But what I've seen, and for me this would be a similar process where what we've gone through with the demand consolidation piece. I would say we run a 2 or 3 day workshop. We put the right people of all parties together, and in 2 or 3 days we'll see whether we have the data, whether we have the information and the process in order to build something like that. I think it can absolutely be done in an application or in a platform like AIMS.
So Jack, I was wondering, AIMS is a multi-diverse platform. Mm-hmm. So how could you address this kind of challenge with supply chain network? Because
I think Willem is completely right. That's the way we do it. And then AIMS has the possibility to create different apps. You get an app store for Liberty Global. And underneath, you basically use data that you use in both apps, like a planning app and a network app. Mm-hmm. And you bring those things together, and you take the best decisions for the complete supply chain.
So there is not a totally different approach that you have your S&OP implementation next to your supply chain network design implementation.
The beauty of AIMS is that you can combine those kind of things. Okay. And don't create a monster, but create small apps that combine the things that really matter.
But all use the same data. All use the same source.
So looking at the tooling and the output in the dashboard, I was wondering, what do you need as a supply chain director to act upon? What kind of data do you need, and what kind of dashboard do you want?
Yes, so what I mentioned was for us most important is risk mitigation. So very basic. We need to have visibility on where we're running short, where is our peaks in demand, both from a material perspective and a geographical location. This is what we want to see. We need to understand what is needed. So if it's set-top boxes, great. However, set-top boxes have a 2 or 3 tier component bill of material. We need to understand whether there is supply risks in silicon, as an example, because we are dependent on the same wafer manufacturers as Apple and Samsung. And if they screw up one batch, we are the ones that suffer because we don't have those volumes. So when they shout at Foxconn, they shout a little bit louder than we can.
They pay way earlier. They pay up front. That's also another thing.
Even if we would pay, I think 6 months in advance, we still wouldn't have the same voice as Apple has with Foxconn. So I think managing those risks and disturbances is the most important, and this is something we don't have yet, but we're now slowly moving into creating heat maps, risk heat maps, and so on. With that data, then we can start building scenarios, and this is then for me the next level that we start integrating with the AIMS capabilities. Okay, if I have multiple scenarios, what do I do? How do I optimize? Where do I go left? Where do I go right? From a supply risk perspective. The second angle is investment. We're very strongly financially driven. So for us, the question whether we invest and capitalize or we have to invest and pay right away, which is cash out, that is a very sensitive optimization. Everything that we refurbish, so we refurbish almost 40% of our set-top boxes as an example, but that's all cash out. If we buy new, we can capitalize. Well, that balance is a constant balance versus shareholder value, shareholder expectation, cash generation, and so on. The moment we invest less, is it smarter to buy new? That may be more costly on the long run. However, it's generating more cash now, and that drives a different financial pattern.
Are these considerations you can model in AIMS?
Yeah. Yeah, we call this objective-based business planning, and I think that would very well fit with Willem's challenge, where you see that the executive board is changing objectives during the year or towards the end of the year. What kind of plan do you want to use to fulfill the objective that you have at that moment? And we all know that, especially in these kind of big companies, that objectives can change over time.
Yeah.
Very rapidly.
Within a week.
So what do you do as a supply chain leader?
Yeah, right.
We can support that.
And looking at the slide again, this is an overview of country level. So this looked quite simple to say, but then again, there's a lot underneath.
Yeah. I think the consolidation of it all definitely looks simple. Again, what we've built so far with AIMS doesn't challenge the optimization capability of AIMS yet, but it was an enabler for us to introduce the technology. So that is step number one. I introduce a new piece of technology. People need to be able to accept that. So starting simple helps. It gave us the ability to connect 13 countries into a single view. So you will never see that in AIMS as being complex, but from a business perspective that is fairly complex. So the ability to read different structures and so on is absolutely required. And although being simple, it does give us the view of the first operational supply risks. So from a risk signaling perspective, that is what it does. That is what we ask for. And this is now what we've introduced in the organization. And we're now at the moment, because we're running a year now, the organization is starting to ask for more. Now, what better position do you have if your organization start to ask for more? Because then you don't have to push new concepts anymore. You have a pulling mechanism, and you can start delivering right away.
So the next, final question I would like to ask, how you should move further ahead. You have different levels of analytics. Yeah. Descriptive, starting, diagnostic, and then predictive, and finally, if you want to do it the right way, you want to end in being prescriptive, exactly know what to do. So how do you translate to Liberty Global, and where are you now?
Yeah, I guess we're coming out of the descriptive mode. We're going slowly into diagnostic, I'd say. In some areas we're a little bit predictive, but that is in the set-top boxes.
Meaning forecasting and so forth?
Exactly, but that is still very limited, because when we're truly predictive is when we've integrated that properly with a product introduction program and an extended supply program. And I think product introduction, we get that in there at this moment. What we haven't got in there properly enough to become truly predictive is our extended supply chain, so our vendor base. And I think we can do a lot more around our actual customer data and customer integration to become truly predictive.
So how long will it take to be prescriptive and you can go to the Bahamas and you are not needed anymore?
If I could do a workshop of 2 days in order to get there, I would sign up tomorrow. Yeah. Realistically, because this entails a cultural change as well within a company, I would say it will take us at least 5 years.
So Jack, what do you see? How many companies are in a level of being really prescriptive in analytics?
There will always be a level of human interaction.
Mm-hmm. Sorry for you.
But the good thing is that you can do that out of the Bahamas. So that's great. Now, what we very often see during implementation cycles is that the user also needs to get comfort in the decision that basically a tool like AIMS proposes. It should not be just a black box that gives you an answer. You need to understand the answer. You need to understand. You need to get a good feeling of that. It needs to fit with your intuition, and I think that takes time. I think from a functional point of view, you can develop it very fast.
Yeah.
So I think together with Willem, we can be there, let's say, in a couple of months or a half a year. But before it is really accepted and fully used in the organization,
but
a little bit more time.
To be really prescriptive, you need outside data. You need data outside your ERP system and the weather and like political data and some other social media data, etc. And so, how common is it already for companies to use that in a good way for supply chain analytics?
It's very easy to get it, but I think it's very limited use.
Yeah.
And I think it's also about what is the data that really matters.
Yeah.
Because there's so much data out there. What is the one that really drives my demand plan, or what is the one that really drives the risk? Because
you have to have correlations within the social media area, see what's happening, and related to the actuals and the forecast. Yeah.
And then you move towards artificial intelligence, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And we're getting there.
So how long will it take that you have your real examples of really being prescriptive in the supply chain analytics?
With really using the external data?
Yeah, social media and the correlations and that kind of stuff.
Good question, because I think within networks we already are descriptive in a couple of client cases and almost real time to taking decisions every hour for the users. I think within the next year, I think there are some clients that we are now talking about using external data to get to take that to bring that into the decision-making process. Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank you for having this conversation. I really liked it. And finally, there's a lot more resources to use. So we've discussed it. There is a checklist with 10 paper questions. We have a SCM IT subway map with a lot of software vendors on it. So there's basically our 16 magic quadrants in one subway map. And there's some more from AIMS and from Districon.
So thanks again, and I wish you a great rest of the day.